next year around him. Garrison Brooks is going to be that guy that has to step up, and as his game keeps evolving more and more, it feels like he's that type of guy that we can lean on to be a leader and feel very comfortable with being a leader.
Yep, he's going to be the face of a team that is going to be on a mission to redeem itself from an embarrassment 2019-20 season. We'll move on to the sixth man of the award, and this award had many options just because Carolina had a lot of injuries. The most injury-riddled season under Roy Williams by far meant that there was a lot of moving pieces in the starting lineup and players coming off the bench. I went with Christian Keeling because he was, for the most part, the most consistent player off the bench, which at times wasn't saying a whole lot. But towards the end of the year, he really found himself. And remember, the month of January, he was buried at the end of the bench, just getting spot minutes here and there. He played 8 minutes in a double overtime game at Virginia Tech. That all changed in February. In the 9 games, Keeling got in the double figures 6 times. His month average came out to 11.7 points per game and was, at certain times, the best option on the floor from the perimeter for Carolina in the month and towards the end of the year. And we really saw him in the back half of the season really become the guy that when he first committed there as the transfer from Charleston Southern, the guy that we thought we were going to get. When he first committed, we were told this is a guy with a big-time scorer that can score in a lot of ways, can be a player on the defensive end too, but is going to put the ball in the bucket at a premium level. It never really happened to the level that we were told it could happen or expected it to happen. But in February, you saw the glimpse of the guy that when he committed to Roy Williams, we thought we were going to get. That's what pushed me over the top. It was just that stretch in February that I was like, okay, this is why he deserves the award, because he scored in double figures 6 of the 9 times. So 2/3 of the games he was in double figures. And you look at some of the games that Carolina lost, heartbreakers too. He was big in the game against Virginia, knocking down 3 free throws to give them the lead that we thought was going to give us a win. And so just stuff like that even in the games that they lost, he still played extremely well in. And so that's why I went with CK.
Yeah, I went with Keeling as well. You mentioned just a lot of injuries. Also, just really not the play that we expected from a lot of guys off the bench either. Mainly Justin Pierce, very similar to Christian Keeling in that when he first came in, expected a lot of him and just really never became the player that we thought. I gave Pierce some thought here just because of how well he played defensively. He was a guy that was a spark plug at times late in the year coming off the bench for Armando Bacot. But, yeah, I went with Keeling here because I'm with you. I think that stretch in February was kind of what put him over the top. Averaged 11.7 points per game during that stretch, posting double-digit points in 6 of the 9 games that month. For the season, only averaged 6.4 points per game, but believe it or not, that was the best number off the bench of any of the players that came off the bench, and shot 42.8% from the field. So this one was really more the fact that there really just weren't a whole lot of great candidates. I don't think that Christian Keeling was awful. I think that, especially like you said, as we saw late in the year, he definitely played really well. And helped this team out. I mean, there was a stretch where he was honestly Carolina's second-best scorer every night, whether it was Garrison Brooks or Cole Anthony who was leading the way. Right behind them was Christian Keeling, and he sort of settled into a rhythm. We said it. We wish that he had been able to settle into it earlier in the year, or we wish that he had another year of eligibility and could come back next year because we think he would be a nice piece to have. But unfortunately, he'll be moving on, and I don't think that was quite the legacy that he wanted to leave behind at Carolina. But definitely a guy that I think received a lot of criticism the first couple of months, and towards the end of the season was able to calm that criticism down and really became a key part of this team when they were trying to build some momentum. So good for him. One of the other things I wanted to mention, I think that if Anthony Harris had been able to stay healthy, without a doubt, Anthony Harris would have been the guy here, because what he showed in those 5 games, he's going to be a big part of this team in years to come, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm with you. If he wouldn't have suffered that ACL injury, he would have been a factor. And I thought that if he would have stayed healthy, Carolina might have been more competitive during that stretch without Cole Anthony. So we'll be looking forward for Anthony Harris to do big-time things once he's fully healthy going into next year. We get to our fourth award, and this is the first time where you and I have a disagreement. The best freshman, I win Armando Bacot, and the reason why is because he was more available. He only missed one game, and you look at his numbers, they aren't bad for a freshman. 9.6 points, 8.3 rebounds, the second most doubles as a freshman at Carolina. Had big monster games against Elon and Oregon early in the year. It's just, Cole Anthony's probably the obvious choice, but Cole Anthony missed a third of the year. Armando Bacot didn't. And whenever he played to his potential, you saw the kind of big man that Roy Williams recruited. Does he got to be more consistent, finishing through contact? Yes. He's got to run the floor better? Yeah. He's got to get stronger and faster? Sure. But I like the availability. I like the fact that he was going to give you points. He was going to give you rebounds. Whenever he committed, Roy Williams mandated with his commitment that we're going to get back to playing with two bigs. You can see why he wants to play with two bigs with Armando Bacot on the floor. He has the potential to have the kind of offensive growth like Garrison Brooks had this year. So I went Bacot, although the answer might have been Cole Anthony more obviously.
Well, I went with the obvious one then. But I think that there is a legitimate case why Cole Anthony should go over Armando Bacot. And the statistics are part of it. For you saying he's more available, I get that. And look, Armando Bacot should be praised just unbelievably for his strength, fighting back from that gruesome ankle injury that he had against Ohio State and actually playing in the next game against Virginia. That cannot be forgotten about, even with his struggles at the end of the year. This is a guy that fought through so much and really just kept playing because he knew Carolina needed him. You could see at the end of the year that the injury was starting to add up. Playing through it, I think, really caused some issues for him at the end of the year. And that's part of the reason why I think Cole Anthony gets the nod here, is just because at the end of the year, Armando Bacot really just wasn't as effective, whether it was due to injury or really he was just struggling. And there were times where Justin Pierce was probably your better option on the floor. So I went with Cole here really just because, you look at his numbers. Look, 18.5 points per game, which was second most among players in the ACC for the entire season. Now, of course, if you look on the actual qualified scoring standings, he doesn't show up there because he missed as many games, but you would think that his numbers would probably still be somewhere around that same area because that was where he was scoring pretty much the entire season. So I don't think he would have dropped off anywhere. He wouldn't have had a stretch during the year where he just didn't score. Finished the season with 20.5 points per game in conference play, which would have ranked first. Also led the team in assists with 4 per game. Really, that was something that kind of we saw him turn on late in the year. Once he started sharing the basketball, looked much more comfortable. The shooting struggles really weren't as evident because, one, he wasn't shooting as much, and two, he knew that he would give up a decent look for an even better look, which I think helped him out a lot. And then finished with 5.7 rebounds per game, which finished behind only Garrison and Armando, which is pretty ridiculous for a point guard. We knew he was a special rebounder. Roy Williams talked about that in the preseason, and he really backed that up. And then, you look, and one of the things that's going to be really criticized is his field goal percentage of 38%. Well, it wasn't great. It was on par with a lot of the other freshmen in the class. And see, that was the big thing that I focused on when I went with Cole Anthony. I think that the expectations for Cole were just so big that it was hard to fill those expectations with the way that he played. He just really didn't play up to what we expected from him. While that stinks, while we can criticize him all we want for that, I still think that he had a really good year for a freshman, especially as many people have pointed out on social media as we've gotten away from the season, especially for a freshman point guard in Roy Williams' system. because remember that freshman point guards have not always been very successful. Marcus Page is one to go back and look at. We talk about him multiple times just between us. Until the ACC tournament, Marcus Page was a guy that we really didn't like to see on the floor his freshman year because, frankly, he just wasn't the Marcus Page that he eventually became. Joel Berry wasn't Joel Berry when he was a freshman. It wasn't the guy that we remember. So for Cole, I think one of the things that also we got caught up in was the fact that Kobe White was just so good as a freshman. And that's, I think, because Kobe White was just not expected to do as much because they saw him as a guy that was a really great scorer in the state of North Carolina, but they thought, well, he was just a guy that scored against high school teams that really weren't good enough to stop him. When in the limelight, he was really just that good of a player and is that good of a player in the NBA. Unfortunately, the Chicago Bulls coaching staff is a bunch of morons and don't realize that. But Cole Anthony, I think it's one of those seasons that I think it'll be criticized, but if you go back and look at it statistically a few years down the line, it'll be one that you'll be like, wow, I didn't realize that he actually played even that well that season, and people will gain more respect for it as we get further along.
Our last award is one where we both disagreed once again. The best defender on the team. I went Garrison Brooks, mainly because in addition to being the focus of the offense during the ACC part of the schedule, he was still the most reliable defender on a team that at times struggled to defend Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Clemson, etc. His defensive rating of 104.8 was the second best for him on his time at Carolina. It was the second best on the team. He was 11th in the ACC in the defensive box plus minus category according to Sports Reference. Mainly, he was just the most solid defender. He was in position more often, was still, making the calls on what to do defensively when we need to switch, not to switch. The kind of stuff that made him the defensive leader that he had been his first 2 years. And so that's why I went with Garrison Brooks, mainly just because even though he took so much of the offensive load, he was still being reliable on defensive end in a year where if he were to take time off on the defensive end, you couldn't have really have complained because he had to give you so much offensively.
Yeah, I think I went with Brandon Robinson here. Garrison was one that was extremely tough to leave off here. And I wanted to mention Andrew Platek here as well, a guy that came off the bench. And you might not have realized it, but was really, really efficient on the defensive end. He had a 108.1 efficiency rating defensively. So one of those guys that I think gets a lot of criticism for what he did on the offensive end, but was really a much better defender than a lot of people realize. But just because B-Rob played more, I'm going to go with him. Led all five starters in defensive efficiency with a 105 rating. Had average the steal per game. But the main thing, I mean, he was the guy that I think did the best job protecting the perimeter, which was something that I think early in the year, especially early in conference play, was just a big issue for Carolina. And he was able to settle it down, especially during that stretch late in the year. Just a guy that worked really hard. And, I mean, the other thing was, you look, it wasn't really a great year defensively for Carolina. But I think him and Garrison Brooks were really your two best defenders. I think Leaky Black towards the end of the season was a lot better, but I just couldn't put Leaky Black up there because he struggled so much early in the year. And just the countless times that he wasn't able to get back and just got beat down the floor, just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I think it'll do the same for him. So I went with Brandon Robinson, but another one of those awards right up there with the sixth man that I think was just pretty closely contested. This one I think was a little more, there was a little more there to pick from as opposed to the sixth man award, but I think it would be Rob.
Well, this team may not have competed to win an ACC regular season championship, an ACC tournament, or a national title, but it still felt good to hand out some hardware, although they're physically not receiving any trophy or medal for their production on the season. But nonetheless, that's
send that out anyways. Not during this time; they wouldn't be able to receive it. So
yeah, no, you actually bring up a very valid point there. And so with that, that's as we talked about, we're officially in the off-season mode. That is the very first step of our off-season stuff. Coming up next, which you'll find on the podcast and on the website, we're going to do in-depth season reviews for every player that was a major part of the rotation. We did this last year on the podcast portion. We're going to do it again on the podcast, and you can check that out on HeelToughBlog.com. And so with that, I'm going to let Anthony talk to you guys about the website.
So there's a ton of great stuff going on right now on the website for you guys. Mainly the podcasts are starting to heat up. So for the Heel Tough Blog podcast, which there's tabs at the top of the page for both the Heel Tough Blog podcast and the